United States government imposes new sanctions on Venezuela's judicial power. Russian Foreign Minister met his Iranian counterpart to address the Joint Comprehensive Plan on Nuclear Deal. Benin's government has provided a chance to young entrepreneurs to develop their projects. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, I'm Laura Palmero. United States government has imposed new sanctions on Venezuela's judicial power this Tuesday, while reinforcing unilateral coercive sanctions against the government of President Nicolás Maduro. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo accused Venezuelan Supreme Court President Michael Moreno of corruption for accepting alleged bribes given by the Venezuelan executive branch in order to gain influence on decisions made by the judiciary. Pompeo highlighted that Moreno has been added to the specially designated Venezuelan citizen list, which unlawfully targets several Venezuelan officials in the government of President Maduro. A group of Italian lawmakers have formally requested the Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte and Foreign Minister Luigi Di Maio to launch an investigation into the violent death of United Nations volunteer Mario Pacciola, who was monitoring the Colombian peace agreement. Pacciola was found dead at his house in San Vicente del Caguán on July 15, following collaboration procedures with Colombian authorities over the issue. Documents for the inquiry have been delivered by members of the mixed group of the Italian Senate, as well as by prosecutors of the cities of Naples and Rome. Meanwhile, Colombian authorities have stressed that Pacciola committed suicide, although investigations have shown evidence of torture. Mario Pacciola's relatives are expected to arrive in Colombia on Tuesday. In Chile, hundreds of indigenous people protested this Tuesday in solidarity with Mapuche political prisoners. The protest departed from the Weekend Square in the province of Malleco and moved to the jail of the city of Angol. The protesters demanded freedom for 27 Mapuche political prisoners who have been on a hunger strike for 79 days. The participants claimed the government of Sebastián Piñera to attend justice for the murdered social leaders and respect for their ancestral territories. Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez reported about the COVID-19 situation in Venezuela in the last 24 hours. Vice President Rodriguez informed there were 440 new COVID-19 cases, 412 were infected for communitarian transmission, and 28 are imported cases. In total, the country has registered 12,717 COVID-19 cases. 6,983 patients have recovered so far. Rodriguez also reported 4 new deaths for a death toll of 120. On Tuesday, Brazil will begin advanced clinical testing of a Chinese-made vaccine against the new coronavirus, issuing the first doses to around 900 volunteers. The coronavirus vaccine developed by the private Chinese pharmaceutical firm CIVAC, and the third in the world to enter phase 3 trials or large-scale testing on humans. The last step before regulatory approval, the vaccine will be administered to doctors and other health workers who volunteer for the program across 6 states in Brazil, one of the hardest hit countries by the pandemic. Brazilian indigenous chief Domingo Vanita passed away on Tuesday in the village of Angra dos Reis in the Brazilian state of Rio de Janeiro. Domingo was the leader of Sapucai, a Guarani tribe, and died at the age of 68 at pneumonia caused by COVID-19. Benit will be buried at the community graveyard following protocols established by the Municipal Health Secretariat, which has ordered not to perform the death ritual in order to comply with COVID-19 health measures. Meanwhile, according to a report by local authorities, 88 indigenous people have been infected with the virus, while medical personnel is deployed in the indigenous village to treat patients. The Pan American Health Organization is worried about the failure of countries in the Americas to flatten the COVID-19 growth curve.
As of July 20th, there has been 7.7 million cases and more than 311,000 deaths reported in the Americas. The COVID-19 pandemic is showing no signs of slowing down in our region. During the last week, there were almost 900,000 new cases and nearly 22,000 deaths reported in our region. Most of these within Brazil, Mexico, and the United States of America.
The Colombian Senate has held a historic election of its leadership. Senator Griselda Lobo from the Fuerza Alternativa Revolucionaria del Común, FARC, will be the second vice speaker of the legislative body that from now on will share Arturo Char of the Radical Change Party. The senator, known as Sandra Ramirez in her fighting years in the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, People's Army, reached the second vice presidency of the Colombian Senate with 66 votes. Griselda, daughter of farmers, who has spent 30 of her 50 years in the armed struggle, supported the peace process. Senator Lobo dedicated her triumph tonight to the 13,000 reinstead fighters and the 208 peace signatories that were murdered.
Desde aquí vamos a trabajar en defensa de los derechos humanos.
From here, we're going to work in defense of the human rights of the indigenous people, the African American people, and the farmers of our beloved Colombia, in defense of women who today in this pandemic are suffering from the pandemic of silence, from domestic violence, and from work overload. From this vice presidency, we are going to work for the basic income for more than 9 million homes in poverty and vulnerability. And from here, I also call on the national government to stop the killings, because unfortunately, the massacres, the extrajudicial executions, or the wrongly named false positives, the assassination of leaders and of those of us who bet on peace, are happening again.
And we'll be right back, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. A Johns Hopkins recount showed the U.S. is approaching the 4 million contagion toll and remains the country with the most positive cases in the world. As of Monday, the country had reported almost 4 million confirmed cases and more than 140,000 deaths, with over 5,000 deaths and 10,000 new infections. Florida is the new nation's virus epicenter, along with Texas and Arizona. Nevertheless, Governor Ron DeSantis and other authorities ordered the reopening of school, which is the reason he's being sued by Florida's Teachers Association. Miami-Dade County Mayor Carlos Jimenez and Education Commissioner Richard Corcoran are being sued as well. Most of the 85 young children in a South Texas county have contracted the coronavirus this month amid a surge in the state health officials said. The county, which is home to more than 300,000 people, is one of the several COVID-19 hotspots in Texas.
Talked about the figure of the 85 infants, and this is a factual number. Very important to highlight all that Q&A. I'm going to try to do a synopsis. That's a factual number. 85 is a total cumulative number. And it's presented in the context of a larger discussion, which is the coronavirus pandemic and how serious it is. And it makes sense to cite this statistics. It illustrates that no one is naturally immune to the virus.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov met on Tuesday his Iranian counterpart Mohammad Javad Zarif, who addressed a joint comprehensive plan of action of Iranian nuclear ordeal the conflict in Syria.
Our evaluations either totally coincide or are significantly close to one another. We discussed in detail the realization of different aspects of the joint comprehensive plan of action on the Iranian nuclear program. This important deal turned 5 years old recently. The agreement generally guaranteed global stability and security, and we are united in the need to put all our effort in saving it.
Following a meeting with German Foreign Minister on Tuesday, Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis condemned Turkey's plan to send oil and gas research vessels into disputed waters of the eastern Mediterranean, while urging the European Union to take action over escalating diplomatic tensions.
Greece is monitoring all the developments with confidence, assuredness, and absolute readiness. Of course, disputing the sovereign rights of Greece and Cyprus in the end constitutes a dispute of the sovereign rights of Europe. We look forward to the support of our allies, but we should know also that if Turkey continues to move in this direction, the imposition of sanctions by the European Union against Turkey will be the only way forward. It is up to Turkey to choose what relationship it wants to have with Greece, with Cyprus, with Europe. But I think at the moment it seems to be choosing the wrong path.
An armed man carrying explosives has taken around 20 passengers hostages and the bus in the western Ukrainian city of Lutsk, police said on Tuesday. The head of the local police service said shots were heard at the scene, but no injuries have been reported so far. Law enforcement has cordoned off the center of Lutsk, a city of western Ukraine some 250 miles from the capital Kiev, and advised residents not to leave their homes or places of work. According to the Deputy Interior Minister Anton Garashenko, the hostage taker made contact with the police and identified himself as Maxim Plokoy.
I have a deep understanding of what is unfortunately happening. Since now there is a communication with the person who captured the Ukrainian citizens, I cannot talk about it more in details. I think you understand me.
And after 4 days and nights of discussions, EU leaders finally agreed on Tuesday on a package to confront the biggest recession in the bloc's history. The summit in Brussels saw exhausted EU leaders finally agreeing on an unprecedented €1.8 trillion budget and coronavirus recovery. After one of their longest summits ever, they confront the biggest recession in its history. The EU will establish a €750 billion coronavirus fund, partially based on common borrowing. The be sent the loans and grants to the hardest hit countries. The European Council will create a system of conditionally aimed at preventing member states from getting subsidies from the Budget and Recovery Fund if they don't abide by its principles.
The text that has been agreed on the rule of law has improved. It's very clear in the document, a very clear commitment to the rule of law and a very clear commitment to the protection of the financial interests of the Union. And this is linked, against this background, to the fact that the Commission has proposed an instrument under which, in case of breaches, measures will be adopted. So there's a very clear link, a reference. The adopting or the voting will be by qualified majority voting. And finally, we will also introduce instruments to strengthen the controls of the EU funds. So there is more clarity, there is more distinction in the text, and a very clear reference, which was important not only to the rule of law, but also to the protection of the financial interests of the Union.
Austrian authorities have decided to reimpose the mandatory use of masks in supermarkets, banks and other public places following fears of surge in new COVID-19 cases.
We have decided that we will reintroduce mandatory face mask use in supermarkets, banks, post offices, all those areas of everyday life. On the one hand, to protect people who cannot choose whether they want to go there or not, because they have to go there. And secondly, because we know that the mask has a symbolic effect. The more it disappears for our everyday life, the greater the lack of concern.
King Philippe commemorated Belgium's National Day on Tuesday while highlighting the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic across the country.
In recent months, we have personally experienced how much we need each other's proximity. The pandemic has caused a high number of victims. Unfortunately, their loved ones have often been unable to say goodbye to them appropriately. It is good that we were able to commemorate them with the entire country this morning. The pandemic is far from over. In particular, let us tell the youth to remain extremely cautious and let us all behave responsibly.
And we have more stories coming up after this final show break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. The Sam City initiative has provided young entrepreneurs in Benin's capital, Cotonou, a chance to develop their projects in order to contribute in the fight against COVID-19 pandemic.
It's Over. It's a mobile application that we developed as part of the COVID-19 crisis management. It actually allowed us to detect the different people who have been in contact with COVID-positive person. Not only does it allow us to trace these different contact cases, but it also provides users with relevant information about COVID-19.
Sam City allowed us to hit the right targets before coming to Sam City. We were doing transformation, but we didn't have the scientific data for the formulation of teas. So thanks to Sam City, we have found a physiotherapist who helps us to formulate these products. People come looking for collaborations, for training, for guidance in setting up a project, for training to get a diploma. But above all, there is an end goal, which is to solve African problems with a new methods, perhaps in saying that ourselves that we have done up to now. We can improve and we want to do it together. Tensions escalated at the Nigerian National Assembly this Tuesday after the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Femi Gbajabiamila, ordered to present documentation on contracts given by the Niger Delta Development Commission. During a public hearing of the House of Representatives Committee set to analyze activities and financial spending of the NDDC, Nigerian Minister of the Niger Delta Affairs, Godswill Akpabio, accused members of the National Assembly of being the beneficiaries of most of the contracts of the Commission. Meanwhile, Minister Akpabio has been called to present such documentation in 48 hours. The NDDC was established in 2000 to develop the oil-rich Niger Delta region.
I will take this matter and this allegation and accusation very serious. And I will give the minister 24 to 48 hours. And clerk, I want you to back this up with a letter from this house. To give the minister 24 to 48 hours to publish the names, the contracts so given, the dates, because obviously these things will be documented. Unveil the companies of the 60% projects that were given to members of the National Assembly, failing which.
In Kenya, the number of infected people continues to rise slowly but steadily, with reports that some hospitals are already operating at full capacity in the capital, Nairobi. Today, the Ministry of Health is reporting 250 deaths from the disease, with total infections standing at just over 14,000. Recently, the government ended a partial lockdown that was aimed at preventing the pandemic from spreading from cities to the countryside. Now, towns and villages are bracing themselves for a potential spike in the caseload. A hospital doctor in one of Kenya's biggest cities has warned that medical workers will need more support as cases continue to swell.
1,168, the number of confirmed positive cases in the country, and brings our cumulative samples tested to 249,998. From the 397 cases that we are reporting today, 389 are Kenyans and 8 are foreigners. Males comprise 236 and females 161.
The African Union is due to hold a mini summit to discuss the contagious mega dam Ethiopia is building on the Blue Nile River, which has triggered a major diplomatic standoff with downstream neighbors Egypt and Sudan. On Tuesday, virtual meeting will be hosted by AU Chair and South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, and leaders from Ethiopia, Egypt and Sudan are expected to take part, as well as officials from the Democratic Republic of Congo, Kenya and Mali. The Grand Ethiopia Renaissance Dam has been a source of friction in the Nile River basin ever since Ethiopia broke ground on the giant project in 2011, with multiple rounds of tripartite talks ending in deadlock. The Bishop of Pemba, Luis Fernando Lisboa, has condemned the world's indifference about Islamic extremist attacks carried out in Mozambique. The attacks have been targeting the northern region of the African country since 2017 and have increased in the past months. According to non-governmental organizations, the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project, more than 1,000 people have been killed since the extremists launched their violent campaign. Tens of thousands have been internally displaced, many of them fleeing to Pemba, the capital of Cabo Delgado province. Bishop Fernando has become a common voice denouncing the situation, alerting on the consequences of the trauma of the war.
The world has no idea about what is happening here because of indifference. Also, we got used to wars. There's a war in Iraq, a war in Syria, and now there's also a war in Mozambique. So we don't have yet that solidarity that we should have. When people are not in it, when they don't feel it in their own skin, they don't see it with their own eyes, it's harder for them to understand. I can understand that, but the more we get in touch with the reality, the more we show interest, and the more we see what is actually happening, then we see it for its dimension. We cannot treat people like numbers. They are people, and behind every person there's a story. There's trauma from this war, either because they lost their home, or because they saw their families being killed, or because some of their relatives are missing.
And we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories in our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Laura Palmero. Thank you for watching.
We share